Remember the real verdict. If we're going to develop a biblical perspective about leadership, we must, thirdly, remember the real verdict. Much of what undermines our stability in ministry is listening to premature judgments about our effectiveness from people whose opinions don't ultimately matter. This is true whether their assessment is positive or negative. The church's assessment doesn't matter. In 1 Corinthians 4, verses 3 through 5, Paul reminds us that there are premature assessments of our lives and ministries that don't matter. Paul writes, "But to me it is a very small thing that I may be examined by you," 4 verse 3. The word examined literally means to conduct a judicial hearing. In the New Testament, it's most often used of official legal proceedings. Some of the Corinthians saw themselves as the judge and jury of Paul's ministry. They claimed the right to personally sit in judgment on his leadership. In fact, in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 3, Paul uses the same word to refer to those who are examining his character and putting his ministry on trial. However, for Paul, the fact that some in the church of Corinth were putting him on trial was, by his own admission, an insignificant matter. Because some of the Corinthians either elevated him as their hero or snubbed him as their enemy, he responded by saying, in effect, it's trivial whether they lionize or demonize him. Paul's attitude must be embraced by anyone in church ministry. We must never measure our success by whether we live up to or fail to live up to the expectations of other Christians, even those in our own church. The people in your church and mine aren't the ultimate judges of our ministry and service. This doesn't mean that their criticism won't hurt, and it doesn't mean that you should never listen to your critics to see if there's a degree of truth in what they say. It's possible that your preaching does need to improve, or that you are making too many changes too quickly and you need to slow down. Perhaps your leadership skills are weak, or your style is too strong. Paul is not advocating that we reject godly counsel, especially that of older, mature men. Proverbs 11, verse 14, 15, verse 22, 24, verse 6. John Calvin rightly says, "It is part of a good pastor to submit both his doctrine and his life for examination to the judgment of the church, and that it is a sign of good conscience not to shun the light of careful inspection." Paul is not discrediting the advice of godly men. Rather, he's saying that their assessment of us is not the ultimate measure of our ministry success. Whether our churches highly honor or criticize us, they're not the final judge. We must be open to counsel and sensitive to criticism, but we must never forget that the Lord alone will judge our success. There is, however, a danger we must guard against. Even though we know the assessment of fellow Christians doesn't ultimately matter, we can still be tempted to change our philosophy of ministry to gain their approval. Whether it's pressure from our own members or from the Christian community in general, there's always the temptation to follow the hottest ministry trends and latest church fads, and there are many. One current trend is to intentionally pursue having a mega church. It's true that the church in Jerusalem was a large church, Acts 2 verse 41, 4 verse 4. But most New Testament churches were small, Acts 16 verses 11 to 15, Romans 16 verses 3 through 5. Congregation size is not a biblical standard of success. It's not even an accurate one. The average church in the United States has 186 attenders. However, that average is highly skewed by the number of mega churches. According to the National Congregation Study, the median church in the United States has 75 regular participants in worship on Sunday morning. Churches with 350 or more attending on Sunday mornings are in the top 10% of church attendance in the country. These statistics reveal that church size is certainly not the standard we should use to judge a ministry. In spite of that, we often feel pressure about the number of people in our churches. There are many other ministry trends we could be pressured to follow. 1. The latest style of music and musical instruments. 2. trendy facilities that bear no resemblance to a traditional church. 3. Emphasizing the culture's view of justice, social justice. 4. Trying to connect with the culture by having tattoos and piercings and wearing trendy clothes. 5. Using video clips in our sermons. 6. Sharing relevant, relational messages. 7. Having multiple campuses and church sites. 8. Holding multiple services to accommodate various styles of music. If we aren't careful, we can allow the judgment of other Christians, including our own members, to define what constitutes a successful ministry. When that happens, unlike with Paul, it's not a small thing to be examined by others. Rather, it has become a big thing. It matters way too much. Just like Paul, we must remember that the church's assessment of us is not of primary importance.